The water came at night. On January 31st, 1953, a wall of seawater 20 feet high slammed into the coast of the Netherlands. In less than 12 hours, it killed over 1,800 people. Entire villages vanished under black water. Families drowned in their beds. This was not a tsunami. This was not a hurricane. This was something far more quiet and far more deadly. A combination of forces that no one saw coming until it was too late. Tonight, we investigate the wave that ate a town, and we ask the question, could anyone have stopped it? 2 days before the flood, the North Sea was calm. Fishing boats moved in and out of Dutch harbors. Children walked to school along dirt roads lined with wooden fences. The people of Zeeland, a low-lying province in the southwest Netherlands, lived their lives below sea level. They had lived this way for centuries. The only thing standing between them and the ocean were walls of earth and stone called dikes. These dikes were old. Some had been built hundreds of years ago, but they had always held. The Dutch trusted them completely. The weather was changing. A low-pressure system was forming far out in the Atlantic Ocean. Meteorologists in England noticed it. They saw the pressure dropping fast. This was the beginning of a storm. But storms were common in winter. No one thought this one would be different. No one connected the dots. What they did not know was that 3 separate forces were about to collide at the exact same time.
First, the storm. It grew stronger as it moved east towards Scotland and the North Sea. Winds began to reach 70 miles per hour. These winds pushed massive amounts of water south, down the narrow funnel of the North Sea, toward the Netherlands. Second, the moon. It was a new moon on January 31st. This meant the tides were at their highest point of the month, a phenomenon called a spring tide. The sea was already swollen before the storm even arrived. Third, the dikes. Many of them were damaged from World War II. Bombs had cracked their foundations. Maintenance had been delayed for years because the country was still rebuilding. The Dutch had no idea their defenses were weak. On the evening of January 31st, the wind began to scream. Fishermen in the port town of Breskens tied down their boats and went inside. The storm was loud, but not unusual. Families sat around dinner tables. Mothers put children to bed. The radio played music. At 11 o'clock that night, the sea began to rise. It rose faster than it ever had before. The spring tide and the storm surge combined into a single monstrous force. The water climbed higher than the top of the dikes, and then, in the darkness, the dikes began to break. The first breach happened on the island of Schouwen-Duiveland. A section of dike near the town of Nieuwerkerk crumbled under the pressure. Water exploded through the gap like a river bursting from a dam. It roared across fields and roads. It swallowed homes in seconds. People woke to the sound of wood splintering and glass shattering. They opened their eyes to freezing black water pouring into their bedrooms. There was no time to think, no time to grab shoes or coats. Families climbed onto tables, then onto cabinets, then into attics, but the water kept rising.
In the village of Stevenise, a farmer named Kees van der Molen heard the roar and ran outside. He saw the water coming across his fields. It looked like a black wall in the moonlight. He ran back inside and screamed for his wife and children to climb to the roof. They broke through the ceiling and pulled themselves onto the wet tiles. Below them, their house filled with water in less than 3 minutes. They clung to the roof for 6 hours in the freezing wind. Kees held his youngest daughter with one arm and gripped the chimney with the other. All around them, they could hear voices calling for help in the darkness. Then, one by one, the voices stopped. The flood spread fast. Over 60 dikes failed that night. Seawater poured into the provinces of Zeeland, South Holland, and North Brabant. Entire islands were submerged. Towns like Ouwerkerk, Stevenise, and Groningen disappeared under the waves. The water was not clean. It was full of mud, debris, broken wood, and fuel oil. It was ice cold. Anyone who fell into it had only minutes before hypothermia set in. Many people drowned, not because they could not swim, but because they could not stay warm. Communication collapsed. Telephone lines snapped. Roads were underwater. The Dutch government did not know the full scale of the disaster until the sun came up on February 1st. When military helicopters flew over Zeeland, the pilots could not believe what they saw. The land was gone. Only the top tops of church steeples and rooftops were visible. Thousands of people were stranded on roofs, in attics, clinging to trees. Some waved white sheets, others were too weak to move. The pilots realized this was not just a flood, it was a catastrophe.
Rescue operations began immediately, but they were chaotic. Boats could not reach many areas because the water was too shallow and full of debris. Helicopters could only carry a few people at a time. Volunteers from across the country rushed to help. Farmers used their own boats. Soldiers swam through freezing water to reach survivors. But for every person saved, dozens more were lost. Bodies floated in the streets. Children were found alone, their parents swept away. Some families survived by locking themselves in attics for 2 or 3 days, drinking rainwater and waiting for help that almost never came. One of the most heartbreaking stories came from the island of Gorée over Flocka. A schoolteacher named Arie de Vries had taken shelter in the attic of his home with his wife and 3 children. The water rose to just below the ceiling. They had no food and no heat. On the second day, his youngest son stopped moving. He had died from hypothermia in his father's arms. Arie did not tell his other children. He held the boy's body and waited. When rescuers finally arrived on the 3rd day, Arie handed them his dead son first. Then he helped his wife and surviving children into the boat. He did not speak for hours. By February 5th, the water began to recede. The true scale of the destruction became clear. 1,835 people were dead. Tens of thousands were homeless. Over 70,000 people had been evacuated. More than 200,000 acres of farmland were flooded with salt water, making it useless for years. Livestock drowned in the thousands. Cows, horses, pigs, chickens, all swept away. The economic damage was unimaginable. The Netherlands, still recovering from World War II, had been hit with another devastating blow. The Dutch government launched an investigation. They needed to know why the dikes failed. Engineers examined the breaches. They found that many of the dikes had been poorly maintained. Some were made of sand and clay that eroded easily. Others had been weakened by muskrat tunnels. Muskrats, small burrowing animals, had dug holes through the dikes over the years. When the storm surge hit, the water found these weak points and tore through them. It was a simple, tragic failure. Nature and neglect had combined to create a disaster. But there was another problem. The warning system had failed. Meteorologists in England knew a storm was coming. They tried to send warnings to the Netherlands, but the messages did not reach the right people in time. Some towns never received a warning at all. Even if they had, there was no evacuation plan. The Dutch believed their dikes were strong enough. They had been wrong. The disaster forced the Dutch to rethink everything. They could not trust the old dikes. They could not rely on luck. If they wanted to survive, they needed to build something stronger, something permanent. In 1958, the government launched the Delta Works, one of the largest engineering projects in human history. Over the next 40 years, the Dutch built massive storm surge barriers, reinforced dikes, and created a network of dams and sluices that could control the sea. The Delta Works cost billions of dollars, but they worked. The Netherlands has not experienced a flood of that scale since. The people who survived the 1953 flood carried the memory with them forever. Many refused to live near the coast again. Others rebuilt their homes in the exact same spot, determined not to be defeated. In the town of Ouwerkerk, which lost over 200 residents, a museum was built inside the old storm surge barrier. Visitors can walk through the massive concrete structures and see photographs of the victims. There are rows and rows of faces: farmers, teachers, children, grandparents, each one a life cut short by water and wind. One photograph stands out. It shows a young girl, maybe 7 years old, standing in front of her destroyed home. She is holding a doll. The doll is missing an arm. The girl's face is blank, not sad, not angry, just empty. That photograph has become a symbol of the flood, a reminder that disasters do not just destroy buildings, they destroy innocence. Today, the Netherlands is one of the safest countries in the world when it comes to flooding. Their technology is studied by engineers from every continent. Countries threatened by rising sea levels look to the Dutch for answers, but the people of Zeeland know the truth. No wall is perfect, no system is foolproof. The sea is patient, and one day,
it will test them again.
Every year on February 1st, church bells ring across the Netherlands. They ring 1,835 times, one for each victim. Families gather at memorials. Names are read aloud. Flowers are placed in the water. It is not a celebration. It is a promise to remember, a promise to never let it happen again. The wave that ate a town did not come from nowhere. It came from a storm, a moon, and a crack in a wall. It came from a belief that the past would protect the future, and it came at night when no one was looking. The people of Zealand learned the hardest lesson the sea can teach. Respect is not optional. Preparation is not paranoia. And when the water comes, it does not ask permission. It simply takes.